cross-reference. Most of the students are social work majors. There's a couple that are women, gender studies, and sexuality minors, and criminal justice and psych. Did I miss anybody's major? A couple are graduating, yay.
All right. Oh, good. That gives me a taste of who I'm speaking with. Thank you.
And then some of them, most of them are going into internships in the fall in social work. So they'll be seniors. Okay, yeah. So I think, how many of you are graduating? Okay, so 2 are graduating, but the rest will be here next semester. But so that's who you have.
Okay, great.
We have one male in the class, but he's not here. Maybe he'll show up late.
All women. Okay, great. Well, I just want to say that I am, I'm sorry that I can't see each of you in your eyes. But so you're just hearing my audio. Is that correct? They don't get to see me either.
Oh, no, we can see you.
Oh, you can see. Oh, God. Okay, great. Okay, good. So you can see me looking into your eyes. Okay. Because
you're on our screen here.
Okay, good. All right. All right. Well, thank you for having us. And I'm Cheryle Gail Grace, the founder of Brave Voices. And Brave Voices is all about helping each adult get comfortable thinking, listening, learning, and speaking up about the childhood sexual abuse prevention, childhood sexual abuse and its prevention. We are breaking the cycle of silence that perpetuates, right? So that's one of the factors that continues the cycle of sexual harm. And everything that's offered on Brave Voices is under the umbrella of nonviolent communication. So nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg is the founder, if you aren't familiar with him. And with this subject, what we're asking is for people to sit in discomfort, right? This is not a subject that's easily spoken about. And people get uncomfortable, especially if there's a history of having been harmed. Or, gosh, I was talking with a woman yesterday who was unable to protect her children from being harmed by their father, her husband. And so when I said things like, it is every adult's responsibility to protect children, she hears that and feels guilt and shame, and she's triggered and she's highly activated. That is not my intention, but that is the ramification for her. So just know that in your own bodies today might bring up reactions, and the work of nonviolent communication is more than just it's not just a communication skill. It is a way of being in the world. And so what we're practicing is self-regulation. How do I check in with my own body and feel, oh my gosh, I've got a rapid heart rate. I've got sweaty palms. I'm speaking faster than I normally would. Okay. I'm going to slow things down. Going to relax my shoulders, going to relax my neck. I'm going to have some self-connection. I'm going to go inside and give myself some empathy, right? So this work starts with ourselves, learning how to regulate ourselves. And for me, it is checking into my body sensations. And then from there, I can check in and see what is it that I'm feeling. And for me, the body sensations is the easiest, fastest way to get there, because I feel sweaty palms. I feel the tension in my neck. And then I'm just going to give you some tools to use in your toolbox, right? So the first one is Grok cards. And everything that I'm offering, I've sent Mary an email, and there are links to everything on the website. So, but I just want to show you what they are. So even after 10 years of practicing this, I still need my cards. So inside this deck are a deck of feelings and a deck of needs, right? And I was not raised to be in touch with what I was feeling. If I was sad, I was shamed. Things like, oh, give me a cry pie. Just feelings were not okay unless they were strong and tough. And anger was, I learned anger very, very well. But so for those of us who are not as emotionally intelligent as others, these cards are an absolutely fantastic way of pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps and really get in touch. So whenever I have something that I'm processing, something that is on my mind, I'll pull out my cards. And so this morning, just to give you a taste, right? I'm not depressed. I'm not angry. I'm not frustrated. I'm not feeling disappointment. I'm not confused. I'm not furious. I'm not impatient. I'm hopeful because you young people are learning what you're learning. That gives me hope. And I'm thankful and grateful to be here and have this opportunity to introduce you to this. And I'm not uncomfortable, but I know the subject can be uncomfortable. So I'm just going to bring that into my consciousness. So, that's just a taste of a few feelings that might be alive inside of me. And then this is and I just wished every classroom starting in kindergarten had, and there are these grok cards for children as well. I just wish there was a deck in the back of the room and everybody could just go to the back and pull out their deck if they're having something that they're struggling with. But every single thing that we do in life is to meet our needs. Everything we say, everything we do, right? And there's lots of us that don't, I'll speak for myself, right? I was raised, boy, jump, how high, do this, do that, meet the needs of everybody else. But what are my needs? What is it that I need? What is it that's important to me? What do I long for? What do I value? And, especially around this subject, my question is, what needs, and these are universal needs. These are needs that every human being on earth has. We just have them to varying degrees. James may be in need of rest and fun and play, and privacy maybe. And I may need some dependability and accountability, right? And so sometimes those can clash, and that's where conflict arises. And so if we can always bring it back to, what are you in need of? What am I in need of? And this way of being that is labeled nonviolent communication, but I prefer conscious communication, compassionate communication, empowered communication, is about meeting every single person's needs. So the question comes to, how the heck do we do that when they are so different? And that comes back to wanting to check in with ourselves and, how do we make the world more wonderful for each other? But we don't do anything out of duty or obligation. We do it because it's going to be fulfilling for me, because it's going to meet my needs. And so getting in touch with our needs. So I just open the deck. Oh gosh, here's love, I'm doing what I'm doing, right? Out of the love of all children, right? I do not want one child to be harmed. So I'm going to sit in the discomfort of the subject. I'm going to care more about the potential benefit than I do about my own discomfort, right? So if I didn't care, I wouldn't have gotten out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning to be prepared for this meeting. None of us as human beings do anything that is uncomfortable unless we care more about the subject than we do about ourselves, right? None of us would be parents if we didn't love our children more than we do ourselves, because parenting is hard, right? Stinky diapers, and there's so much that goes into that. So just to give you a little bit more, so the question that I ask you to think about is, what needs need to be met in order for you to feel safe enough to think, listen, learn, and speak about childhood sexual abuse? So perhaps it's privacy, right? So we all have choice about how much we listen to. So, if anything gets too graphic, please, say something. And feel free to let me know. Honesty, safety, and a really big universal need that we in our culture don't embrace as much as I believe we need to embrace it is mourning, right? There are so many things in life that the only choice we have is to mourn. We can't change it. There's nothing we can do about it, but we can feel it, process it, allow it to move through our body. So I'm just going to take a break because that's a lot. We did feelings and needs and sitting in discomfort. So is there any questions before I go on and go a little bit more about this communication style?
They're all shaking their heads no.
All right. Okay, great. So this nonviolent communication is 4 pillars: feelings, needs, observations, and requests. And as far as Brave Voices and listening, learning, thinking, and speaking about childhood sexual abuse, for the observations, we graphically express exactly what happened to us when we're breaking the cycle of silence. So I'm not going to just say I was sexually abused as a child. What does that mean? There's, that we can make up all kinds of stories in our head about what the heck is abuse, right? But if I articulate as if you were watching from a video camera or hearing on audio, that is the way that I'm going to describe what happened, so that it's clear as mud, right? And I do this, and I ask for brave voices to speak up in this way, because it is impactful, right? If we hear about a war, right? It just doesn't impact us. We don't get it. We see bodies on the ground. We see the buildings that have been destroyed. We get it. We care. We're going to be invested. And so I'm wanting people to get it, to care. You may or may not know this, but there are 75% more children harmed sexually than there are who have cancer. Every form of childhood cancer. And I think about how much money is invested in hospitals for fighting cancer. There are 75% more children harmed sexually than there are who have cancer. This just blows me away that, yeah. So it's out there. It is epidemic. All of the information sheets that you have, you'll see where all the statistics are from to back up what it is that I'm saying and what I know. but those are just numbers. So when we talk, when we share our experiences of having been harmed, we're doing it from an observation rather than a judgment, right? So if I was telling my story, but I was doing it from judgment, I might say, my brother's a fucking asshole, man. You know, geez, he's a monster. He, you know, blah, blah, blah. That isn't helpful, right? Those are my judgments. Those are criticisms. Those are not the observable facts of what happened. So that's that piece. And then the last is requests. And my request is that each person that I interview go on and interview 2 others. I don't know if you can see the map behind me, but eventually that map will just be covered with lines connecting. So I've interviewed my sister-in-law, ex-sister-in-law, who lives in Texas. And, you know, I asked her, who's not computer literate, so it's not going to happen with her, to interview 2 others. And so eventually the whole map will be crossed with, and the point is that we are all connected. We're all together. And the interviews are on Archive StoryCorps. Has anybody heard of StoryCorps? How familiar are you guys in Pennsylvania with StoryCorps?
Speak up.
I know about StoryCorps.
All right. Yeah, there are, I think, 3 different books where they've chosen the best of the love stories. And so anybody can interview anybody on StoryCorps. It used to be you had to go to a recording studio and do it into a recording booth, but now over the internet. So 10 years ago, I interviewed my father about leaving Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl. And it goes into the Library of Congress. So with Brave Voices, the goal is to have a bulk of interviews, a body of evidence is how I like to think about it, because most of us who were harmed sexually as children did not report, right? So when we read the numbers, and all of the numbers vary, but a very common one is 1 out of 3 girls, 1 out of 5 boys. Those are reported cases. So far, not one of the Brave Voices that I've interviewed reported their harm as children. And we know there's very good reasons for not reporting, right? Most of us want to protect somebody, not making things worse, not make a problem. So, you know, as a child, speaking about a subject that they've never heard discussed openly is not something that we can expect of a child. And so Brave Voices, we break the cycle of silence. We speak up. We, in front of the children, talk about the harm that is out in the world. So children grow up knowing that it's a safe subject. They hear us talking about it just as much as we would talk about there are peanut allergies, there are earthquakes, there are tornadoes, there are fires. How do we prepare in case any of these things happen? We put on helmets, we put on safety belts. So, you know, prior to a play date, we are going to talk to our neighbors and, you know, say something like, gosh, you know, in our family, our children are raised with body safety rules, and they know that no one is to touch any of their private body parts, and they will not touch anybody else's, and that there's open communication in our family, and there are no secrets. And there's lots and lots of role plays to watch on the Brave Voices website. There's links to Off Limits, which is a wonderful book that teaches how do we talk about this in every age as kids are growing up, right? We don't want to scare them, but we want them to know that there's nothing that they can't come to us and talk about. And normalizing the conversation of sex. Sex is a beautiful, wonderful thing. And James, jump in. I feel like I've said a lot of words.
I'm just enjoying the narrative. It's really lovely to. I don't know that I have a lot to add right now, but I take that back. Something around the nonviolent communication and the way we feel things in our bodies. So I just want to reiterate that, what's happening in our bodies and then being able to come back to that sensation is the way that we begin to break that cycle of, the cyclical thinking, the reactivity, the graying out. That's what I call it. Is like when your mind just kind of goes blank and you can't say things. So, this has been my experience in my life, learning how to come back to that. So it's often not as simple as just stopping and listening. It's a process of actually being able to recognize that this is happening, and it has to do with the way our neurobiology, which is an amazing system. Our nervous system is easily manipulated, but also easily retrained. So we have to go in, depending on where somebody's experience is, going back in and learning how to retrain your nervous system, which is, polyvagal and the brain and the enteric and, all of the pieces, to be able to sit in discomfort, which is a lot of life, but to be able to sit in discomfort and then act from discernment. It's a process. And I, highly suggest, even if you haven't been traumatized, to find some sort of training, either, like the Peter Levine's work with the somatic experiencing, or anything that, that Bessel van der Kolk talks about, or, there's a myriad of other pieces out there with EMDR and breath work and movement and all these kinds of things that help us find that place. Like I said, even if we haven't been extremely traumatized, to be able to have more agency and resiliency and discernment. And, with the nonviolent communication, just sitting here listening to you, I recognize places, where that has either become very well integrated into my life, or I can go back in and come back to those basics again, the 4 pillars that you were talking about. It's like, it's a constant process and journey. So yeah, we don't learn something and then we're done with it. So I really appreciate that. And then when talking about the number of children who have been sexually harmed, one of the things that we have to remember is that there are a lot of ways that people are harmed. There's a lot of levels of what that harm is. And it might be all the way from just like the gross physical harm to more like an emotional or spiritual place, So I would say that the vast majority of my harm came from the heavy duty fundamentalist Christian guilt, and then the shaming coming from parental and authority figures in my life that didn't allow me to actually process, and actually shaming the process even when I brought it up. So that would have been mine was, I would say, much more along those lines. Because like I said, in my case, there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't like violent, forced, that kind of a thing. So Yeah,
And-
and then the confusion between, love and sex, and people that are supposed to protect you and that kind of a thing is also part of that. But yeah, so just like recognizing that, when we say like, there's this number of people that have been harmed, recognizing where somebody is really, really different. Sometimes it's much easier for people, and this, you find this out when I found this out, working with a lot of combat veterans and whatnot, that the one-time physical harm is oftentimes easier to deal with than these long, I call it slow drip trauma. Like it doesn't seem like anything's going on, but it builds up and builds up over time. So yeah, that's it makes you doubt yourself quite a bit. So that's a tough one. So anyway, I appreciated that. I just wanted to like put a little clarity in that for myself.
Yeah, thanks, James. And the research on those who are harmed and then have the support in processing through it, heal, recover, resiliency is so much stronger, right? And so that's being a brave voice is not just sharing a lived experience of having been sexually abused. A brave voice would be a parent who is able to sit in their discomfort when harm is disclosed to them. Can you imagine being a parent and your child having the courage to come and share what's happened? And there is a sheet on the website as far as very, very specific. How do we hear something like that? How do we not go into reaction? And if we can have it be about the child and what the child needs to process the pain and the hurt and the break of trust and everything that goes into all of those layers of harm. And that child's, wow, they're just gonna have such a better time than those of us that, silenced, no way to, and self-silencing. It's not that somebody necessarily told us, don't speak about this. That doesn't, we silence ourselves. It's just in our culture that this is not what we talk about. This is, and it's so a part of Brave Voices is not only getting brave about helping our children be educated and know about the potential harms that can happen in the world. It's talking about sex as a normal, everyday, wonderful part of life, right? So that,
Yeah, just one thing in there too is like if we actually as a culture begin to talk about our traumas, our harms and whatnot, and there's been, there's this huge percentage of people that have been harmed in some way, and we can own that piece for ourselves. It actually creates empathy and compassion to be able to listen to what somebody else has experienced, whether it's our child or somebody else's child or another adult that is just being able to come forward or, open their own heart or their own traumas up. So, it's very important. I think what you said is that, the process isn't just about some kid being able to tell their story. It is this full cultural spectrum of the traumas and the communications and the suppressions and the secrecy that is happening on multiple levels that creates this container that this kind of thing can happen. So that something that's so beautiful and so natural all of a sudden becomes evil and violent and aggressive. Yeah, it's just it's so the more that we can do that and like you said, normalize not only the conversation but the feeling and the understanding of our innate sensuality in our bodies, you're going to create a much healthier culture all the way around.
Mm-hmm. And again, the process of nonviolent communication comes into here, because if we can make requests, right? If I'm around somebody and I'm feeling pretty juicy, and I have the wherewithal to say, gosh, James, you are adorable. And when I'm around you, I am so interested. I want to spend time, and I'm curious to know if you would like to, our requests are always doable, right? And timestamp. So do you have 30 minutes to sit together and hold hands and look into each other's eyes and see if there's a mutual interest in each other? Right? I mean,
that's 100% yes.
But how many of us have been taught to make clear requests, right? And so if I have all these feelings in me, but I don't have a way to connect with another human being, and that's what this is compassionate, empathetic communication is about, is connecting. How do we connect? And so, most of the 91% of the people who harm children are not pedophiles. They are everyday human beings, just as lovely and wonderful. My brother who harmed me was a darling human being. Everybody adored Doug, right? And, but if it's not something, like, how do we learn how as children to make requests and, be comfortable with what's, especially the number one age is 12-year-old boys that harm younger children, right? Have they been taught how to care for themselves when they have these feelings, right? So it's a big ball of wax. It's really complex. Yeah. It's not just interviewing people who are harmed on StoryCorps. A brave voice will be a parent talking to their 12-year-old boy and saying, gosh, sweetheart, there's weird things happening inside your body, right? I mean, and making
we don't have any processes at this point for taking care of that and normalizing that. And you're seeing a huge, it's a big bump in the road for boys and girls. I mean, there's certain things that are happening at this point with a lot of girls around like between 11 and 13, 11 and 15 right now. I won't go into that, but it's just there's some things that are showing us. So, along with being able to ask, or, is knowing. Well, the other thing is like being able to go into your body and know what it is that you want and need, and having a platform and having a place to talk about that. So if a 12-year-old boy is in with a group of, doesn't have to be men, but let's just say like a men's group, if we're in like a traditional tribal place, you have a place to go and talk about that, and you have a group that understands what's happening. So we've shut ourselves off to these natural processes a lot, and I won't even just say in the West. I think it's pretty much worldwide. Every place I've ever gone, there's just this shutdown. And so, men, I'll be a little crude, are basically taught by culture, it's kill it or fuck it, and that's just that. And that I do not believe that to be our innate natural process. I believe that we are nurturing. I believe that we are tender. I believe that the aggression and the yang part of man is meant to be used as to create the container of nurturance and protect that space, so that that can happen more. And unfortunately, it's been really hyped. And so I a lot of the things that are attributed to the masculine at this point, I don't believe are actual natural processes. I think they're long time socialized at slow drip trauma over thousands of years. That's my opinion, but it's a little off topic, I understand. So.
Yeah. So getting back to the requests again, because I want you all to have some tools to just practice a few things. This is a little plastic bracelet, and I put it on my left hand, And I catch myself when I am complaining, right? And if I complain, I take it off and then I put it on my right side and start counting my 21 days over. So the goal is to keep it on one wrist for 21 days. And this is just a concrete practice to become aware of, when am I not making a clear request, right? Because every time we hear a complaint, and just start noticing this with other people, and what we want to do is become translators in our head. We hear a complaint and then wonder, what is it that that person longs for and wants and cares about? So we think about the typical nagging wife, right? Which stereotypical, it might be a complaining, nagging husband, but, learning how to make those requests. And so anyways, it's a practice to become aware of, what is it that I want? And am I clearly asking for it? And just like meditation or going to the gym, these are often skills that we haven't cultivated. And so I'm just, my request is play with it. Just start to notice. I didn't even think of myself as a complainer, and yet I had to wear this thing for years before I went 21 days without having to move it from one wrist to the other. And
Hey, Cheryl.
yes.
Just wondering if any of the students right now have any questions,
Yeah, let's
or
do it.
any comments and interjections into everything we've talked about at this point.
Great.
Anybody? Questions or comments?
I really like the,
Speak loud.
I really like the feelings cards that you had. I have some nieces and nephews that struggle with PTSD from abuse and that are on the autism spectrum, and they'll just break down and cry for no reason. So those cards I'm going to recommend to get so we can communicate with them better.
Awesome. Yeah, the children's grok cards have bears on them, and that each feeling is expressed in the bear's face. And what is so amazing is how many feelings we can have at one time. How can we be hopeful and depressed? How can we be excited and feeling anxious, right? So it's a wonderful way. There's also a book for kids called Feelings on Parade, which is a beautiful, just to help us all get comfortable with our feelings. Any other questions?
I missed the part what he was saying about veterans. So I had what was he saying about the gentleman? What was he saying about veterans and struggle? Or
Well, what I was doing was making a bit of a comparison to the types of trauma that can happen. So there's a difference between a one-time trauma, like let's just, like somebody getting beat up or shot or raped or that kind of thing, like a one-time thing, and what I call slow drip trauma. So something that happens slowly over time, and the effects on our nervous system and our, the whole neurobiological system, and how that affects our perspective and how we act in life, and how what kind of treatment it requires. So it's just harder to see, is that what sometimes they call it complex PTSD, that long-term trauma.
so you're saying, like, if someone is abused for a long period of time in their childhood, like many years, that's complex PTSD versus a veteran just getting like something happened.
Or, so sometimes, it's sort of a comparison is what I'm saying, is like, So if you're talking about childhood sexual trauma or abuse, a one-time rape situation is going to be different than this long drawn out sexual abuse, and then you have so it creates a different sort of issue within the body, and it's oftentimes harder to root out or change.
Thank you, because I'm just trying to understand them both of them. So thank you.
I couldn't hear that.
I'm trying to understand both of them. So thank you.
Yeah, I would really highly suggest reading The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I mean, he goes pretty deeply into a lot of that stuff, although it's more focused on treatment, I think. But anyway, it's a good resource for that.
And what I want to add as well, James, is that one episode of being harmed that happens, but then what happens inside of our head can be right. The long-term trauma from, I'll just speak about myself, right? I mean, I spent years of my life plotting my brother's death. I lived in a paranoid fear that something would happen to my daughter. I slept on the floor of her bedroom because I was renting a room from someone's house and I didn't trust that person, even though I didn't have any evidence to not trust this person. But, that I turned to drugs and alcohol and sex and, I mean, and I think, oh my gosh, how many minutes was the harm itself? And yet I'm 58 years old and there are still repercussions, even though I've done a lifetime of every form of therapy imaginable. Right. And so, because there's
it's really hard. I mean, it's really hard to go, well, there's this kind and then there's that kind. You can't do that. It's this spectrum or this continuum. And then again, it's like, do we have a place where we can actually talk about it? Do we do it? The first time that I really, really confronted my situation was I went to therapy after my first divorce, and I began to sort of open it up. And what I had to do is I had to go and make a recording on a cassette away by myself, and then give that to my therapist. And I actually could never really talk directly to her about that. But that was my first opening, and somebody that actually showed some empathy and understanding. And that allowed me to begin to process and then, eventually open it up to my family and the people involved. And then that whole process led me to you. So I'm 57 and, it's still evolving.
And I want to go back to empathy because that is the gold nugget. That is the secret to the nonviolent communication. That is the secret to everything in life, right? I mean, in order to have connection, empathy for myself, going in, what am I feeling? What do I need? Loving up, not, all my judgments, all my rumination, loving that up. Oh gosh, today's been hard. You've been ruminating on something, right? Awareness of it, but not criticizing myself about it. And the same for another, right? So empathy sounds easy, right? But because what if we're both triggered at the same time? How do we have empathy for another when we're stimulated and in reaction, right? So then it's the conscious awareness that I just need some time to go self-regulate. Let's come back in an hour and, see if we can be there for each other. Right. It's reflecting back what we hear the other saying. That is, we all want to be heard and known. So it's trying to slow down, and rather than creating the next thing that we're going to say in our head, is taking in, and at least for me, I have to be comfortable with pain, right? And what I deem as weakness in myself, in order to be there for another's pain and sadness, right? So I can't be there for another unless I can be with myself. And so that's a practice. Again, it's coming back to sitting in the discomfort, and we are all feel different things or discomfort. For me, I'm most comfortable. What's habitual for me is being strong and tough, and then I have confidence. And but anything that's feels weak or victimish, right? Then I'm going to go into reaction, and I'm going to get prickly. So I've got to come back to figuring out how to be okay with, I'll just use shadow sides of me, the parts that I'm curious to know if somebody in the class can reflect back what they just heard me say there, so I can hear myself, because I feel like that was a lot of words. I'm wondering if I expressed it in a way that was understandable. Empathy.
They should all know this one. It's number one skill for social workers.
Right?
And the self-reflection is actually the first step in our plan change process. So, anybody? Don't be shy. They're coming all the way from the other side of the country.
There's a game that we play that's called Empathy Not, right? So empathy is not one-upping, right? So, wow, you were raped. Well, I was raped 30 times, right? That's not empathy. Empathy not is giving a solution. Oh, you were raped. Okay, well, I go to Brave Voices. There's lots of help on that page, right? That's not empathy either. And yeah, you guys all know about empathy, but it's a whew, at least for me, it's a big practice, not taking, so very often we think we're being empathetic when, oh, you were raped. Well, hey, I was raped too. And this is, what happened to me, right? It's hanging in there with the other, having the focus be on the other, being with the other. Being alongside of, even if we don't say any words, but we breathe and hang out with them. Empathy. Yeah, I really do believe it's, I am extremely guilty of bypassing empathy and going to strategies and solutions. Yeah. That is so much easier for me to do that than to sit in the discomfort and pain and sadness of whatever another person is experiencing. But if we're able to do that, right, if we can hang in there and breathe through that discomfort, it's a gift to the other to be seen and to be heard and have that opportunity to grieve. All right, well, let's see where we're at. So Brave Voices has 4 pillars. Speak, which I explained is on the archive StoryCorps, and open and free and accessible to absolutely anyone. So if any of you know people who were harmed, you can go to the Archive StoryCorps page and you can interview them. There's a list of questions. You can choose from those questions, or you can write your own. You can do the interview in any way that you like. What I like to ask people is, what is it that you want the world to know about your experience of having been harmed sexually as a child? And every story matters. We learn from each experience, and yet there's a similarity to so many of the lived experiences. And so having that shared reality, my experiences, I cycled across the United States in 1994, speaking out against childhood sexual abuse. And every day of my life, no matter where I was across the United States, people came up to me and shared their experience of having been harmed. And this is why I can say with full conviction, it's an epidemic, right? That's way too common to be in a park in the middle of the country and have somebody come up and share their experience. And yeah. So anybody can interview anybody on Archive StoryCorps. And what is it that, oh, I gotta stop my alarm. All right. Yeah, and it's an odd thing that happens when somebody's sharing their lived experience in this way. That I describe it as a feeling of elation, right? So after the official interview is over, my suggestion is that people come to a Zoom format and record the decompression process, because wonderful information comes out of that. For many people, this is often the first time they've had an opportunity to share their lived experience from start to finish, in the way that they want to, sharing how they want to. And so, I described it as taking a weight and having it leave their body, right? There's just, we have to get out of us, right? And there's so many ways. I did something, it was called Kid Power for Children, but it model mugging for adults, right? Where we're attacked, and over and over again, we get to poke them in the eyes, elbow them in the nose, kick them in the groin, right? And get to reenact the harm that I experienced and get to get it out of my body. It's our brains have the beautiful capacity of imagining. I didn't, many of us freeze in the moment of harm, but through this ability to practice being attacked, get to work through it. This is how I wish I would have been able to respond to what happened. But as a child, fight, flight, or freeze, right? So, and the same thing goes for verbally sharing it. We're getting it out of our body. Some of the questions that interest me most in doing these interviews are, what physical challenges have you lived with throughout your life that you believe arose because of the harm you experienced? I'm sorry?
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you talking about trauma-based therapy? Because I went to a couple of retreats where I'm a veteran. I'm diagnosed with PTSD and MST. And we went to a couple retreats for like 4 days, and we reenacted like what trauma is going on in our lives. This is not what happened to us in the military, but they took us from our childhood, teenage years to adulthood, and then threw in the military crap on top of it. And we got to do like physical therapy. For one instance, I was laying on the floor and everybody laid on top of me, and that represented me sinking to the bottom of the lake, because my happy place was the kayak, and everybody laying on top of me represented a struggle that I wasn't allowing myself to overcome. So in order for me to overcome that struggle, I had to say a solution and something positive, and then each one got off of me. So is that what you're talking about, like feeling and walking through and expressing your emotions here? Are you talking about that type of therapy?
You know, that's there are 1,000 ways to roam, and that sounds like an absolutely fantastic one. Yeah. I mean, just to give you a taste of some, I've done something called Samurai Warrior Games, where you spend a whole day in teams, and you can't smile, you can't speak. The fates of war can send you to the cemetery at any time. You do competitions, and if you lose, you are sentenced to death. You know, and we learn so much. I've done ropes courses where I've climbed trees and jumped off of a platform and belayed down. You know, that was for trust building. I've walked on fire twice. You know, I am a physical being, and I'm a massage therapist of 34 years, and I learn through doing. So for me, these kinds of the model mugging, where I was attacked and got to reenact, you know, what had happened and get myself out of that. Those have been, and I've done breath work where we breathe and over oxygenate our body, and whatever's trapped inside of us comes out. You know, those kinds of things have helped me much more than one-on-one talk therapy or group therapy, right? So we're just all different. So for me, getting in my body, dropping into my heart, it has, you know, but there's so many different ways to, why don't you jump in there, James? Let's hear what's helped you.
Well, much the same thing. I mean, I think that you probably all understand that, you know, our issues are not just in our mind, they're in, or in our brain. They're very physical. You know, we're somatic beings, and there's no way to separate out. You know, you can't just psychologically take care of something. And I think that's becoming more and more understood and accepted within the psychological world, that we have to treat or address or work with the whole being. So something like what I don't know the person's name is talking about, where you both have to cognate and be physical at the same time. You feel that pressure. It actually has a deep effect on your neurobiology and helps repattern repattern those or just repattern your nervous system, so that, you know, there's emotion. Like I said, you know, there is no emotion without posture, and there's no posture without emotion, right? So the way that we move in the world is reflected in the way we think, and vice versa. So if we have to address the whole being. And I've worked with people. I worked with a rape victim a while back, and, you know, had a towel and held it down over her throat. I wasn't choking her, and she was able to push off and scream at the same time, you know, get off me. And it, you know, it just, like you're saying, there was this elation, there was this shift, there was this change, and, you know, there's a visible shift in the way this person moved after that. So, it requires follow-up and all of that other, everything else. But yeah, breath work, movement, meditation, touch therapy, these things are of deep importance and in different levels depending on what's going on with a person and how they experience whatever trauma they're going through. Yeah, you can't. I'm a firm believer that you cannot address, especially trauma, simply by talking about it. But it's important too. Like, it's important to be able to verbalize what's
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got speak, listen, learn, and connect. So Brave Voices Listen is a timeline of all of the brave voices who have come before us, right? So Marilyn Vanderberg, who was Miss America, was one of the first that I've known about who has come forward and shared her experience of having been harmed and the consequences of that. Over and over and over again, when I, with confidence, share the harm that I experienced openly, others, wow, okay, wow, this is something that we can talk about. This can, and so we want to model openness and honesty and transparency so that it empowers others to be able to talk about it. And our children are going to grow up hearing, okay, this is just another subject. This is another realm of life. So it's all about releasing the shame. So we've got many, many amazing opportunities to hear from people who are openly talking about the subject. And learn, oh my gosh, it's just amazing how many wonderful programs there are out there. We've mentioned EMDR. There's one organization, Louder Than Silence, right? Which is kind of the beginning stage of a person's healing journey. So, right, just saying something, at least they're not being silent, right? And so with this organization, they bring in money for people who can't afford EMDR therapy because this person has found how helpful that is and has been for her to recover from the childhood sexual abuse. And so when people come to Brave Voices, do you want to learn and explore forgiveness? Okay, so then there's information on Fred Luskin's book, Forgive for Good, right? Where they've done wonderful sit tests, right? We meditate for 15 minutes on something that makes us happy, something that is uplifting. You all probably know about this research. And then our immune system is positively impacted for, I think it's 10 days, in comparison to ruminating, dwelling on, focusing on murdering my brother and what that does to our immune system, right? So that was a biggie for me. It's like, wow, yeah, I've been wanting, to hurt my brother, but that's only in my head. He hasn't been negatively affected one iota for all these years. I'm killing myself. I don't want to die. I want him to die, right? I mean, it's just, so we've got to learn to take responsibility for what's happening inside our head and heal ourselves. And so I love Fred Luskin's work. And then our connect is connecting with, practicing in community, right? We heal in community. And so we have this shared reality that, together we are stronger. We don't have to isolate and be alone. We can learn how to trust and rely on and depend on. I mean, look at James and I, right? I mean, it wouldn't be the same if it was just me here by myself sharing this. It's, it's wonderful to have camaraderie and collaboration and, to have those 4 pillars, right? To have that community of people that we trust. So what do you, any questions on anything so far? Something you want to share with us?
I have a question.
Yep.
What would you recommend I'm not a mother, but what would you recommend a mother who has 3 children that have experienced abuse and that are diagnosed with cognitive PTSD? I think that's the term that you both use. Like, would you recommend them talk therapy or more like physical therapy, or like a book that she could read to help with her children? Is there anything like that could guide her in the right direction to start healing with them? I know there isn't one solution, but like maybe like a book that she could start reading or anything.
And are you thinking about for her helping herself or for her to be able to help her children?
Help her children.
Okay. I love Conscious Parenting.
Okay.
It is one of the most beautiful books on parenting that I've read. I use it like a Bible, even though I'm a grandma and haven't been, my daughter's 40. But that is probably my number 1 favorite parenting book, Conscious Parenting. And then Hunt, Gather, Parent, I believe is the other one. Hunt, Gather, Parent. Gosh, I haven't. And what I love about this is the woman went to other cultures and saw how they were able to get the kids up and go to school without yelling. How indigenous cultures had everyone in the family. The goal is we all need a purpose, and children need their place in the family as well. And, rather than having them go off and play, it's participating in doing the dishes, participating in folding the clothes. They are a part of the family, and they participate as it's completely nonviolent, because it's under the premise, because if a child's interested, they want to come make the tortilla and pat. But we know children's attention spans are short, right? And so as much or as often as the child wants to come and play and participate and have their own little broom, but when they're done, then they just run off to the next whatever that interests them. And there's no, oh, you stay here for 30 more minutes and keep working on this, right? They get to come and taste and participate. And then, so that's a fabulous book as well. I highly recommend that. And, I'm sure you all know the audiobooks are just such a excellent way to digest information, right? Because we can cook, we can garden, we can drive, and for parents, very often to find time to sit and read a book is pretty much.
Sorry, that my phone is nosy.
Okay.
So you know what? I'm gonna have to. We're just about at the end.
Okay.
And I know these students are always running to the next class.
All right.
They get to, and it's a big campus, so sometimes they have to go a ways. So I just want